Hello, this is Ben Haynes, and this is my Level 3 task about the Desmos Graphing Calculator. You can find it at desmos.com. The nice thing about this graphing calculator, it's accessible online. It's not on a small screen as it is on a graphing calculator. Very large display, easy to type on, also able to manipulate colors. But another nice thing is it's very dynamic. You can make certain values change, and you can see how those changes manipulate the graph. Certainly you could use this in mathematics or science where you'd normally use a graphing calculator, but there's also some artistic type things that you can do, and I'll show you an example of that when I show you the Desmos video in a moment. In terms of my readings, really they broke down into three categories. First was about constructivist theory, and you want students to build the principles for themselves, but that you also want to, in terms of 21st century learning, you want them to build on what they already know. So if you can have them start with what they know and then they kind of discover those principles on themselves, they'll certainly stick a little bit better. A couple of other articles. One was about a middle school teacher who used technology in her classes, and she described how students were able to not only apply just the basic concepts, but were able to apply it to real life problems. And she also talked about how her testing scores and her grades all seemed to be higher than before. Another person, Gardner, had recommended with working with math teachers about using technology on specifically for concepts that students struggled with. So if the students were not getting it from an explanation in class, maybe it's time to look at a technology option for it. Last set of articles that I looked at kind of looked at perception from students in doing that, and the first article there, the students understood using the technology was important. They also saw some benefits in using it to explain or to display, say, 3D models or things that were hard to understand in class, but by seeing it they were able to do more and to do better with it. Also, another article just warned that it's great to use the technology, but also to make sure that it's feasible to use the technology, that it makes sense, and that also there is an acceptance from the students. Make sure you're not using a technology that's too difficult for them to handle. Alright, so now I'm going to show you a demonstration of the Desmos website. See, you have a keyboard down at the bottom with various math commands that you can use. You can also click on functions. You can see there your various trigonometric functions along with various statistical calculations, and then some other math things over here, least common multiple, greatest common denominator, those kinds of things if you need any of those things. Over here to the side I have where I can type in an equation. And the nice thing about Desmos is that you don't have to solve everything for y. So for example, if I wanted to graph a line, I could say y equals 6x plus 2. Notice it graphs it as I type in things. So there's your equation of your line. Notice you can see it very clearly. If I long click over here, I have the option of having a solid line or a dashed line. I can also change the color of my graph if I want to. Another nice thing I like about Desmos is that it allows you to very easily play around with the domain and range. So for example, if I wanted to say, okay, I only want this graph for x is less than 0, notice it automatically does a domain restriction for me and only graphs the line from anywhere the x values are 0 or less. I can also do range restrictions in the same way. So for example, if I change that to y is less than 0, notice that the whole graph only goes below that line. If I wanted to, I could also I can do compound inequalities, so only graph the line between -1 and 1, and it kind of stretches up here to where you can't see. So maybe I'll go let's go 0.51, and then over here 0.51, and you can see that it restricts it in. So one thing this tool I think would be good for is helping students understand domain and range. They actually can see the changes that happen very quickly through some other things that you can do. One of the nice things that you can do with this is you have the option of making sliders. So what I have here, I have a simple parabola drawn, But notice that the leading coefficient I have is A. Well, when you type in a letter like that, it allows you to create a slider. And I can click down here on the slider, and I can change what values that I want the slider to go between, and also what steps. And then if I press the little play button over here, notice that the graph is changing. I can see the different values for A, and as those values change, I can get the idea of what it would do to the parabola by changing those values. So notice that's a very dynamic thing where the kids can actually see those numbers changing and actually see it happening at the same time. Certainly other examples of this, you could do it with a line. Another way you could do it is if you wanted to have a discussion about circles and ellipses. So this would be the equation of a circle if A was 1 and B was 1. However, I could create a slider like this and say, well, what happens if I increase the A? Notice what happens to this. And I can see the way that the graph stretches along the horizontal axis, and then I could go back in and then I could say, all right, well, what happens if I manipulate that number under the Y? And notice that that changes the ellipse and stretches it in a vertical direction. So notice that the nice thing about this is just being able to manipulate and change these things. One final thing that we've used this for is in terms of creativity, which is one of the 4 C's we were discussing before. This is an example one of my colleagues did. You can tell this is a pretty simple drawing of a boat, but notice what we've done over here on the left hand side is we've used the Desmos features, and we've created this by using various mathematical statements over here. And we can very easily manipulate the domain and range of these various functions. We can also shade these various functions by using inequality symbols. And what we did last year is we had a project where students created a picture, and then they simply saved this file to a PDF, and it would also save the equations that they used, and then they put that into the Dropbox on the LMS, and it was a great way for them to show us that they could go in, they could manipulate these equations to create some sort of a drawing. And then we also was very easy for us to grade because we could go on the LMS, we could easily see if they submitted them on time and just kind of check out all the things. So I invite you to go to Desmos.com especially and look at some of the pictures like this that users have created. I think you'd be really surprised to see what is available and how this works. As for the 4 C's when using Desmos, certainly there can be a lot of collaboration and communication between the students, or having the students working in groups, having them manipulate graphs, or having them to create a particular graph, or maybe having to take some data and put that together. The creativity, for example, with our graphing project, they had to create a picture, so they had to not only figure out a picture but know how they wanted it to look, and then they had to manipulate the different mathematical statements in order to produce the graph that they wanted. And then almost always with math you have critical thinking, so once you decide what functions that you want to use, then you have to figure out, okay, how do I manipulate those to create the picture, to create the graph that I want? Or if you're exploring other concepts, like I said, with the slider values, with the A and the B, so what does this value do? What does that value do? If I change this, what will happen here? So certainly a lot of options with using this, and especially just a nice dynamic graphing program to use. Very easy to access, and certainly a good tool that I have used in class and would certainly recommend to anybody. Thank you.